Camila Duarte stood nervously in the small apartment she now called home in Queens, clutching the delicate bouquet of white lilies she had bought for the occasion. It was the morning of her wedding day, a modest ceremony planned in the city that had become her new world. She gazed out the window at the bustling streets below, a mixture of hope and anxiety swimming in her chest. At 26, Camila had left behind her sunlit hometown in Brazil, chasing a dream that felt as fragile as the lilies in her hands. Her English was still imperfect, but her heart was full of love for Jack, the man she believed had chosen her for reasons far beyond citizenship and paperwork. Jack Harper had the easy charm of someone born and bred in Manhattan. His sandy hair was always perfectly tousled, and his confident stride seemed to command every room. On the surface, Jack was the kind of man who made you feel lucky just to be near him. But today, as he adjusted his tie in the mirror, a shadow flickered in his eyes, a flicker Camila failed to notice over the swelling excitement. Their first interaction as husband and wife at dinner that evening was supposed to be celebratory. Instead, as Jack introduced Camila to his friends in the dimly lit restaurant, a thin smile played on his lips while he mockingly repeated her halting English phrases. "You mean you need to learning, Camila," he said, chuckling along with his friends. The laughter was cold, and Camila's cheeks burned. Confusion and hurt rippled through her, yet she forced a smile, telling herself this was part of a new language, a new life. But as Jack's eyes met hers, Camila sensed this was only the beginning of a long, complicated journey she had yet to understand. In the weeks following their wedding, Camila tried to settle into her life as Jack Harper's wife. New York was nothing like the rhythms of her hometown in Brazil, where mornings drifted lazily into afternoons, filled with the scent of coffee brewing and the chatter of familiar voices. Here, every moment seemed sharp and rushed, wrapped in a constant, noisy urgency that Camila struggled to match. But she believed that love would be the bridge to this new world. That Jack would be her companion, her ally in adapting to this uncertain life. Instead, Jack's behavior began shifting in subtle, cutting ways that Camila had not anticipated. What at first seemed like awkward teasing soon took a cruel edge as he mocked her English more openly. One evening, after a long day of trying to navigate the confusion of grocery shopping and transport schedules, Camila sat at the kitchen table teaching herself phrases from a battered English book. When Jack came home, he barely looked at her, then scoffed, "You sound like a parrot." "It's I am going to the store, not me go store, how can you mess up so much?" His words stung more sharply than the bitter coffee she was attempting to sip. Camila looked down at the pages she had been repeating. "I'm learning," she said softly, hope flickering in her voice like a candle struggling against the wind. Jack laughed again, louder this time, as though her efforts were a joke. At the dinner table later, where his friends gathered around with laughter and slaps on the back, Jack repeated her mistakes in a high-pitched, exaggerated voice, drawing cruel amusement from his crowd. "Poor Camila," Jack said, smirking, still sounding like a child lost in a dictionary. Everyone laughed. Camila's face flushed red, and she forced herself to swallow the lump rising in her throat. She wanted so badly to disappear, to retreat into the safety of her own thoughts where Jack's barbs could not reach her. But she was alone in this foreign city, with only fading memories of a life that had felt freer, kinder, and warmer. She had married Jack believing in the promise of love, now it felt like she was trapped under the weight of his ridicule. Friends back home and those she had met along the way noticed her quiet withdrawal. Ana, a fellow Brazilian who worked at the bakery down the street, tried gently to comfort her one afternoon. "Jack doesn't see what you bring, Camila. You're the strongest person I know, even if he can't say it." Anna's kindness was a small oasis in Camila's hardening world. But despite Anna's words, Camila hesitated to share the growing discomfort she felt in her marriage. She told herself Jack might change, or maybe she was misunderstanding the way love was shown in this new place. Still, the sense of isolation deepened. Jack's mockery now came with meaner remarks about her culture and background, his tone sharp and dismissive. "You're not ready for this country, Camila. You never will be, he said one night after a tense argument about money and grocery lists. "You married me to get your green card, didn't you? It was all just a plan to stay here." How pathetic. The words hammered into Camila's heart. Shock made her silent at first, then tears welled in her eyes as she clung to the last shards of hope she had for their marriage. The man she had vowed to love and trust was unveiling himself in a way that threatened to break her. The tension between them did not go unnoticed by others. Jack's casual cruelty became a subject of whispered concern among their neighbors and shared acquaintances. Lillian, a co-worker of Jack's from the marketing firm where he worked, observed the subtle dismissiveness Jack showed Camila during work events and casual gatherings. Though Camila rarely spoke up herself, Lillian suggested gently that she seek some support. "You don't have to put up with feeling small, Camila," she said one afternoon, her voice soft but firm. "You deserve respect as much as anyone." But for Camila, the walls of loneliness were thick, and the courage to fight harder had not yet grown. She tried to hold her family in Brazil close with daily phone calls, their voices full of love and worry, but miles and time zones made their support feel distant, a glimmer through glass. One evening, she accidentally overheard a terrible conversation through the open door of their apartment. Jack was on the phone in the living room, his voice lowered but sharp with satisfaction as he spoke to someone she couldn't hear. "Yeah, it's working perfectly. She's completely under my control. Got her tied up with the green card, she thinks I want her. It's all part of the plan," he said with a cold laugh. Camila's breath caught. The room spun as her hands trembled on the doorframe. This was not just a difficult relationship anymore, this was a deception, a betrayal of everything she had believed. Her mind stormed with questions she wasn't ready to answer. Had she been naive? Was love just a word Jack used when it suited him? Anger flared inside her, the bitter sting of humiliation invading every corner of her being. Yet beneath the hurt was a quiet ember, something less broken and more resolute than she expected to find in herself. If Jack thought she was just a pawn in his scheme, he had gravely underestimated her. Looking out the window into the busy nighttime city, Camila felt a small but crucial shift, a flicker of clarity in the fog of pain. This was not just about a marriage or a green card anymore, it was about who she was underneath it all, about reclaiming the dignity she feared she was losing. If you have ever faced the shadow of being underestimated or dismissed, you understand how difficult it can be to find your voice in the silence. Camila's journey had just begun, and though the path ahead was uncertain, the first step toward her own strength was quietly taking root. The challenge was no longer Jack, or this unfamiliar city, it was learning to stand tall again. Camila sat alone in the small, dimly lit room of a community center, clutching a pamphlet about legal rights for immigrants. The soft hum of chatter and faint footsteps from the hallway seeped through the thin walls, but inside her heart, the noise of doubt and fear was louder. The idea of confronting Jack had seemed impossible just weeks ago. How could she challenge the man she had married, the man who held her future in his hands? Yet now, sitting opposite an attorney who explained her options with patience and clarity, the first threads of resolve began to weave through her uncertainty. Her mind flickered back to the wedding day, to the soft light of hope in Jack's eyes, and to the cruel laughter that had replaced it. Was she simply imagining it, or had there always been something bitter beneath his charm? The attorney's words sank in. She had rights, and no one, not even Jack, could manipulate her into silence or submission. But the path was treacherous. Jack's mood darkened once he sensed Camila's quiet distance. At home, his mocking grew harsher, now laced with threats. "You don't want to make waves, or I'll leave and take everything," he spat one night as she began packing a few belongings she thought might be useful. "Who will believe a broken English immigrant against me?" Camila shivered, but a stubborn spark kept her fingers steady. Her uncle, an enigmatic figure from her past whom she barely knew, had died suddenly weeks ago, leaving her with a staggering inheritance, a billion-dollar empire spanning industries she could scarcely grasp. The news was both a shock and a lifeline wrapped in confusion. Initially, the weight of her new fortune felt overwhelming. How could she manage the legacy of a man she barely knew, a world so far removed from her quiet, struggling existence? But with it came power, and the promise of freedom. Jack's reaction was swift and revealing. His usual smirk twisted into greed, eyes glinting with calculation. "You think you can just own all that cash and keep me out? I built you up," he argued one evening, his voice dripping with entitlement. "Without me, you're nothing here." Those words, which should have shattered her, only fortified Camilla's resolve. She was no longer the lost girl who had stumbled into a marriage of convenience or cruelty. Her inheritance was not just money, it was her chance to rewrite her story. However, the news of her fortune spread quickly, stirring whispers and judgments among neighbors and acquaintances. Some congratulated her with thin smiles, while others cast skeptical glances, questioning the sudden rise of a woman they barely understood. Jack sensed the shifting tides and intensified his efforts to control her. He pressed for dominance in their fragile relationship, wielding his anger like a weapon. "You're not ready for this life, Camilla. You'll crumble under the pressure, just like your English," he sneered during an argument that left her staring at the ceiling in silence, heart pounding with a mixture of defeat and defiance. In the quiet moments, Camilla wrestled with doubts that gnawed at her. Was she truly capable of handling this empire? Did she deserve the inheritance when it seemed to only attract more trouble? But amid the turmoil, she found strength in memories of her childhood, her mother's encouragement, her father's steady hands guiding her through school, the laughter and love she thought she had left behind. Night after night, she studied the business reports that arrived in thick envelopes, learning the language of finance, of contracts, of decisions that could change lives. The English phrases that once felt foreign began to feel less like barriers and more like keys. Slowly, a woman who had been mocked for her mistakes was turning into someone who owned her mistakes and learned from them. It was during one particularly tense evening that Jack's cruelty reached a new low. After a gathering hosted by a mutual friend, where whispers followed Camilla and Jack's strained smiles, he cornered her in the dim hallway outside the apartment. "You think money makes you powerful? You're a joke. Just a green card with a fat bank account," he hissed, his voice low and venomous. "I'm the one who made it possible for you to dream this big. Without me, you're nothing." Camilla's hands balled into fists at her sides, but she met his gaze squarely. "No, Jack. I made this possible by being myself. You only ever saw what you wanted to take. But I'm done being invisible." Jack sneered, stepping back. "You're naive if you think this is over. You'll regret pushing me away." That night, Camilla lay awake, the cold tile beneath her barely warming her restless body. The weight of Jack's threats mingled with her own fears of failure, but below it all beat a steady pulse of determination. She was no longer willing to live in the shadow of someone who saw her worth as less than a scam or a green card. If resilience and courage could be found in quiet moments of doubt, then Camilla was gathering them like precious stones. She reached out to Anna and Lillian, the friends who had offered support before, sharing her story more truthfully now. Their encouragement was a salve to her soul, reminding her she was not alone. As the days passed, Jack's attempts to intimidate became more desperate. He hinted at legal trouble, casting doubt on her suitability as a wife and partner, sizing her up like a threat to be dismantled. But Camilla's newfound circle and her attorney's advice gave her a shield she had lacked before. An unexpected complication arose when an old acquaintance of Jack's appeared, claiming knowledge of Jack's manipulation and offering to testify, a sliver of hope in the tangled web of deceit. Camilla's mind swirled with the possibilities and dangers ahead. The empire she inherited was a symbol of the life she had yet to claim fully, but the road was far from smooth. Jack's shadow still loomed, threatening to swallow her efforts whole. Yet beneath the surface, a quiet revolution was unfolding. Camilla was learning to trust herself, to see beyond the judgments of others and the cruel words that once defined her. She was discovering that strength was not the absence of vulnerability but the courage to rise amidst it. As she prepared for what might come next, a question lingered in her mind. Could she truly break free from the past forged by Jack's cruelty and claim the life she deserved? The answer was not yet clear, but in her heart, a flicker of hope burned steadily brighter. For those who have faced the shadows of doubt and despair, Camilla's story invites reflection. When pushed to the edge, what hidden strength within us is waiting to emerge? The courthouse was an imposing structure, its stone pillars rising high against the gray morning sky. Camilla arrived early, her pulse steady though her palms sweated behind her clenched fists. The weight of expectation hung heavy, not just from the room packed with strangers, but from the years of pain, doubt, and quiet courage she'd carried inside. Today was not merely another day, it was a reckoning. Jack arrived late, his usual self-assured strut replaced by a forced calm that barely masked desperation. His suit was tailored, his smile strained, but those dark eyes flickered with something that hovered between fear and calculation. Around him, murmurs floated, curious glances at the man who had wielded mockery and manipulation like weapons, now seeking sympathy. The courtroom buzzed quietly with anticipation as the judge took her seat. Camilla's lawyer, a steady presence her own age named Daniel, gave her a reassuring nod. The moment had come to expose the truth hidden beneath years of coiled resentment. Jack's attorney rose first, painting a picture of a devoted husband wronged by miscommunication and cultural differences, framing Camilla as unstable, unwilling to adapt. Mr. Harper loved his wife, the lawyer intoned, but the stress of language barriers and differing backgrounds created tension he regrets deeply. He seeks a second chance to rebuild their marriage. Camilla felt her stomach tighten but stayed composed. She knew what Jack's side aimed for: sympathy. Forgiveness. A reset button on a story he had controlled for too long. When her lawyer rose, the atmosphere shifted. Calm but firm, Daniel began presenting evidence laid bare with quiet power: text messages where Jack mocked her English, voice memos where his tone carried scorn rather than care, testimonies from neighbors and friends recounting Jack's public ridicule and private threats. The room absorbed the words with rising disbelief. Jack's confident facade faltered under the weight of undeniable proof. Even his attorney's composure wavered. In a moment that seemed to stretch as long as time itself, Camilla's own voice echoed softly but resolutely. When asked to speak, she stood, her eyes steady, voice clear despite the nervous beat of her heart. "I married believing in us, in the hope that love could bridge differences," she said. "But I was used, not as a partner, but as a means to an end. I was mocked, belittled, made to feel invisible. Yet I am not invisible. I have a right to respect, to dignity." The judge's gaze never wavered from her, as though taking in not just her words but the woman standing before her, whole, scarred, yet unbroken. Jack's pleas for mercy and a second chance fell flat. After the legal arguments concluded, even his lawyer advised against pursuing further claims. The evidence was too clear. Jack was no longer the man who could command sympathy or control. Outside the courtroom, whispers turned to conversations. Some expressed surprise at Camilla's quiet strength, others at Jack's unraveling. For the first time, she was not defined by his judgment but by her own voice. Camilla felt a surge of something she hadn't experienced in years: agency. It was as though the empire she'd inherited was no longer just wealth but a symbol of her reclaiming her life. Later, when alone in the afternoon sun filtering through the courthouse windows, she allowed herself a moment to breathe. The tension that had coiled inside her began to unravel, replaced by a cautious joy. It was not the end, but a beginning, one shaped by truth, courage, and newfound freedom. For those who believe in second chances, Camilla's story offers a profound question: how often do we deny ourselves dignity and strength because we are afraid to confront what hurts us most? This courtroom verdict was not simply legal, it was deeply personal. As she stepped back into the bustle of the city, Camilla felt the eyes of the world no longer as judgmental, but as witnesses to a woman who stood tall amidst the ruins of her past and walked boldly into her future. The final gavel struck with a decisive echo in the courthouse, reverberating through the hushed chamber like a cleansing wave. The judge's voice rang out clearly, leaving no room for misunderstanding. Jack Harper's requests for spousal support were denied. Control over the vast inheritance passed fully and unchallenged to Camila Duarte. Custody of their beloved dog, which Jack had tried to wield as leverage, was awarded to Camila with warmth and acknowledgement of the true bond they shared. Jack's face, once cocky and sure, now twisted into a mask of disbelief and defeat. As Jack's legal team gathered their things, wordless and defeated, Camila sat upright, a quiet strength radiating from her still form. The years of mockery, silence, and self-doubt receded, replaced by an undeniable triumph born not from wealth alone but from dignity reclaimed. Outside the courthouse, a gathering of familiar faces, friends like Anna and Lillian, neighbors who had watched the drama unfold, and newfound allies from the community, greeted Camila with embraces and tears of joy. For many, it was more than a victory over a cruel husband. It was a victory for every voiceless woman they knew, each dismissed or belittled for their differences. Camila found her voice amidst the crowd. Her words were steady, illuminated by empathy and firmness. I stand here today not just as a person who inherited wealth, but as someone who refused to be defined by prejudice or cruelty. This experience taught me that broken English or cultural differences are never reasons to be disrespected or devalued. We all deserve to be seen, heard, and honored for who we truly are. The soft murmur of agreement rose around her, and as Anna squeezed her hand, Camila felt the heavy cloak of isolation fall away. The community that once felt like a cold backdrop to her private struggle transformed into a vibrant embrace. The experience left its marks. Lines of resilience etched around her eyes, a tempered patience in her calm demeanor, and a fierce flame of self-respect burning brightly within. Camila understood now that real strength was not in hiding pain or pretending all was well but in acknowledging her scars and rising above them. Jack, on the other hand, seemed to shrink in the shadow of his own defeat. Those who once sided with him quietly distanced themselves, uncomfortable with the truth laid bare. His begging for a second chance in court was met with quiet disbelief and polite, but firm, refusals. The man who had mocked and used Camila was now left to reckon with the loneliness his actions had sown. In the days that followed, Camila began transforming the billionaire's empire, not just as an owner, but as a leader committed to changing lives. She started a foundation dedicated to supporting immigrant women, those caught in the liminal spaces of new cultures, who faced the silent battles she once knew so well. Her mission was to offer not just financial assistance but mentorship, community, and, most importantly, the kind of dignity she had fought to reclaim. The foundations were laid slowly, carefully. Meetings were held in sunny conference rooms where whispered doubts once reigned. Camila's command of English grew stronger every day, but more than words, she wielded compassion and wisdom learned from hardship. One afternoon, as she walked through the renovated offices, she paused by a photograph of the group's first gathering, women from all backgrounds, laughing and supporting each other. The memory filled her with hope. From pain had sprung purpose. If Camila's journey moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more compelling stories of courage and hope. See you in our next story.